My brother's life was destroyed by a single sentence he uttered at a family dinner. I always knew my older brother, Leo, was arrogant, but I never imagined his cruelty would unravel his entire existence so completely. He had a way of using words like weapons, all while wearing a smirk that made you question if you were the one being too sensitive. The incident at the dinner table was just a final, violent tremor before the entire cliff face of his life crumbled into the sea. To understand the magnitude of that night, you need to know the background. My brother Leo is 34 and his wife, Isabelle, is 31. They'd been married for 7 years. Isabelle is a talented graphic designer, quiet and incredibly kind, but she'd been worn down by years of Leo's constant belittlement. The central point of tension in their marriage for the past 5 years had been their struggle to have children. Isabelle had endured 3 miscarriages, each one a fresh hell that left them more fragile, while Leo seemed to treat them as personal inconveniences, failures on her part. After the 3rd loss, they decided to pursue IVF. It was a long, grueling, and expensive process, but on the 3rd attempt, it worked. Isabelle carried the pregnancy to term, and they were blessed with twin girls, Ava and Amelia. The girls were now 2 years old, the absolute light of Isabelle's life. Leo, however, seemed to view them as another possession, another trophy to his own success. He was a moderately successful real estate agent, but he carried himself like a titan of industry, while Isabelle had put her own career largely on hold to care for the twins. The dinner was at our parents' house in Oakwood Valley, a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a birthday celebration for our father. The air was warm, filled with the smell of grilled food and the sound of the twins laughing as they played on a blanket on the lawn. Isabelle was bustling between the kitchen and the yard, making sure everyone had drinks, that the food was perfect, all while keeping a watchful eye on the girls. She looked tired, but she always did. Leo, meanwhile, held court on the patio, a glass of whiskey in his hand, holding forth on the housing market to our uncle. The first comment was small, almost typical. Isabelle brought him a fresh drink, and he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Finally, you remembered your primary function, keeping your husband hydrated." He chuckled. A few people gave weak, uncomfortable smiles. Isabelle's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, just turned and went back to the kitchen. I saw her shoulders slump for a moment before she straightened them and continued. This was the pattern. Leo would make a cutting remark. Everyone would feel awkward. Isabelle would absorb it, and we'd all try to move on. Confronting him was useless. He'd just accuse you of having no sense of humor, or not understanding the dynamics of his marriage. As the evening wore on and Leo drank more, the comments got worse. He started complaining about the cost of the twins' preschool. "I'm working my fingers to the bone to afford that place," he announced, "while Isabelle gets to live the life of leisure at home. Sometimes I think she got pregnant on purpose just to retire early." I saw my mother open her mouth to object, but she closed it again. We were all complicit in our silence. Isabelle was clearing plates at that moment, and her hands trembled so badly the plates rattled. She quickly put them down and disappeared inside the house. When she returned, her face was pale but set. Leo was now talking to our father about the twins' future. "I'm going to make sure they don't end up with some deadbeat," he said. "They need to marry for ambition, for status. Not like me, marrying for, well, I guess I married for love, didn't I?" He said the word love like it was a disease. Isabelle sat down quietly. Leo turned to her, his eyes glinting with malice and whiskey. And then he said the words that I will hear in my nightmares forever. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with false concern, and said, "You know, Isabelle, I was thinking, with all the trouble we had conceiving, and then suddenly we get twins with the IVF. Are you absolutely sure they're mine? I mean, the doctor handled that part, didn't he? It's just a little too convenient." The world stopped. The chatter died. The only sound was the distant laughter of the children. Isabelle stared at him, and the look on her face wasn't one of hurt or anger, but profound, final resignation. It was a look of someone who has reached the very end of a very long road. My father started to say, "Leo, for God's sake." But Isabelle stood up. She didn't slam her hand on the table or raise her voice. She was eerily calm. She looked directly at Leo, and her voice was clear and steady, cutting through the thick silence. "You want to know the truth, Leo? You're right. They're not yours." You could have heard a pin drop. Leo's smug expression froze and then shattered into confusion. "I was already pregnant when we started the last round of IVF," she continued, her gaze never wavering. "The IVF failed. Again, the doctor was going to tell us. But I asked him not to. I was pregnant by a man I had been seeing for almost a year. A man who listens to me. A man who doesn't treat me like a servant or a defective incubator. I was going to leave you then, but I was scared. I stayed, and I let you believe the IVF had worked because I thought, foolishly, that having children would change you. It didn't. It just gave you two new people to disappoint." She turned to the rest of us, her eyes glistening but her voice firm. "I am so sorry you all had to hear it this way. But I cannot live this lie for one more second. I'm leaving. The girls and I are leaving tonight." And with that, she walked across the lawn, scooped up a twin in each arm, and carried them to her car. She had a diaper bag packed, and sitting by the door, I realized she had been prepared. She strapped them into their car seats, got into the driver's seat, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and a broken family in her wake. Leo was apoplectic. He screamed, he cursed, he demanded that someone go get his children. But no one moved. We were all too stunned, too horrified by what had been revealed, and by the sheer, brutal truth of it. The Uber he called arrived 20 minutes later, and he left in a fury. The rest of us sat in the wreckage of the evening, unable to speak. That was the beginning of the end. Leo showed up at my apartment the next day. Isabelle had changed the locks, and his key no longer worked. His calls went straight to voicemail. He was desperate, pathetic, begging me to talk to her, to make her see reason. He insisted it was all a lie, a story she concocted to humiliate him. But a cold, hard part of me knew it was the truth. I'd seen the look in her eyes. That wasn't a performance. That was a liberation. I felt I needed to provide more context, because my initial post made it seem like this was an isolated incident. It wasn't. This was the culmination of years of psychological abuse that we, as a family, witnessed but failed to adequately address. We didn't bully Isabelle. We loved her, but we failed to protect her from Leo. Leo's behavior wasn't just about mean jokes. It was a sustained campaign of devaluation. He had been unemployed for 2 years after a failed business venture, and during that time, Isabelle was the sole breadwinner, working freelance design jobs late into the night. Yet, Leo would tell people at parties that he had to keep a tight leash on the household spending, because Isabelle had no concept of money. After her second miscarriage, he made a comment at a Christmas gathering that made my blood run cold. He said, "My wife's womb seems to be a hostile environment. We might have to look into surrogate real estate." When Isabelle fled the room in tears, he shrugged and said, "What? It's the truth. We have to be practical about these things." He controlled every aspect of her life. He gave her a monthly allowance from the money she earned. He criticized her cooking, her cleaning, her parenting. He'd tell her she was lucky he stayed with her, that no one else would want damaged goods. He isolated her from her friends, accusing them of being a bad influence or being jealous of her success. The final pregnancy with the twins was a special kind of torment. He constantly made comments about her weight, about her cravings, about how inconvenient it was for him that she was so tired all the time. He once told her, in front of me, that she should try harder to be pleasant because her mood swings were ruining his concentration at work. Work that didn't exist. I had tried to talk to him. So had our parents. Every time, we were met with a wall of defensiveness. "You don't understand our relationship," he'd say. "Isabelle is fragile. She needs a strong hand. She knows I love her. It's just how we talk." He had an excuse for everything, a way to twist reality, so he was always the reasonable one, the put-upon husband, and she was a hysterical, oversensitive wife. So, when Isabelle detonated their marriage at that dinner table, I was horrified, but I wasn't surprised. She had found the one weapon that could match his cruelty, the truth. I don't condone the affair, but I understand the desperate loneliness that must have driven her to it. Leo had systematically dismantled her self-worth, and she found someone who helped her rebuild it piece by piece. Leo, staying on my couch, was a wreck, but his devastation was entirely self-centered. He wasn't mourning the loss of Isabelle, the person. He was mourning the loss of his possession, his status as a married man and father. He kept saying, "How could she do this to me?" Never once, "What did I do to drive her to this?" After days of his relentless pleading, I finally agreed to meet Isabelle. I needed to hear her side, to look her in the eye and understand. We met at a quiet cafe in a town she knew Leo would never visit. She looked different. The perpetual tiredness was still there, but the tension was gone from her shoulders. She looked peaceful. She apologized immediately for the dramatic reveal. "I'm sorry, Ben," she said. "I never wanted it to happen like that." But Wei said that, in front of everyone, after everything, something just broke. I couldn't carry it anymore. I asked her the hard question. "Is it true about the girls?" She nodded, her expression solemn. "Yes, the IVF failed. I found out the same day I learned I was already pregnant. The father is a man named Daniel. He's an architect I met on a project. He's kind and stable, and he loves the girls as his own. He's been wanting me to leave Leo for months, but I was terrified. Leo had me convinced I was nothing without him." She confirmed that Leo had no legal standing. His name wasn't on the birth certificates because he wasn't the biological father, and he had never adopted them. She had already seen a lawyer. When I asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, she gave a sad, firm shake of her head. "No, Ben. There is no universe in which I would ever go back to him. That chapter of my life is closed. I spent 7 years in a prison of his making. I'm free now, and I will never, ever go back inside." She then told me something that chilled me. Leo hadn't just been calling her. He'd been sending threatening texts, showing up at her mother's house, and even waiting in the parking lot of the girls' preschool. She showed me her phone. The messages were vile, full of rage and threats to take what's mine. This wasn't the brother I knew. This was a stranger. "This is the real Leo," she said softly. "The one you only see glimpses of. This is who he is when the audience isn't there. I'm getting a restraining order. Ben, I have to." I left that meeting with a heavy heart. I told Leo everything. I told him Isabelle was resolute, that the girls weren't his, and that she was getting a restraining order. He exploded. He accused me of being in love with her, of conspiring with her to ruin him. He was utterly delusional, convinced that if he could just talk some sense into her, she would come crawling back. The following weeks were a steep descent. Leo moved out of my apartment and into a rundown motel. He started drinking heavily. I'd get calls from dive bars to come pick him up. He lost his job, what little work he had been doing. Because he stopped showing up, he became obsessed with proving Isabelle was lying, spending what little money he had on a shady, private investigator who, of course, took his cash and vanished. The lowest point came when he got into a fight at a bar and was arrested for assault. I had to bail him out. When I picked him up, he had a black eye and a split lip, but he was triumphant. The guy deserved it, he slurred. He said, I was a loser whose wife left him. The irony was completely lost on him. My parents and I staged an intervention. We begged him to get help, to see a therapist, to deal with his anger and his drinking. He raged at us, called us traitors, and smashed a lamp in my parents' living room before storming out. He disappeared for 3 days. We were terrified he'd hurt himself. When he finally called, his voice was hollow. I don't understand, he kept repeating. How did I lose everything? I was exhausted. My own life was suffering. I realized I had been an enabler, trying to fix problems he created, shielding him from consequences. I decided to step back. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I told him I couldn't help him anymore until he helped himself. He called me a Judas and hung up. The final, unthinkable chapter began with a phone call from an unknown number. It was a nurse from Oakwood General Hospital. Isabelle had given birth to a baby boy a few days prior. Daniel was a registered father. Leo had found out, we never learned how, and had just been arrested for attempting to kidnap the newborn from the maternity ward. My blood ran cold. The details were horrifying. Leo had somehow gotten hold of a visitor's pass and pretended to be a hospital volunteer. He'd gone to Isabelle's room while she was sleeping, and Daniel had stepped out for coffee. He had unswaddled the baby and was trying to leave when a nurse, who knew Isabelle had restraining order against him, stopped him. He fought with security, screaming that the baby was his son, that Isabelle had stolen his family. The police were called, and he was arrested on the spot for attempted kidnapping and violating the restraining order. At the police station, he was unrecognizable. Gaunt, wild-eyed, he was a husk of the arrogant man he once was. But the arrogance was still there, twisted into a terrifying delusion. He's mine, Leo insisted to me through the bars. My blood. She can't do this. I was saving him. There was no reasoning with him. He genuinely believed he was a victim, the righteous father rescuing his child. The district attorney threw the book at him. The attempted kidnapping of an infant was a serious felony. At the sentencing hearing, Leo was given a chance to speak. We all held our breath, hoping for a shred of remorse. Instead, he stood and pointed a shaking finger at Isabelle, who sat calmly next to Daniel. She is a liar and a whore, he spat. She stole my daughters, and now she's stolen my son. This is all her fault. The judge was not moved. He sentenced Leo to 3 years in state prison. As the bailiffs led him away, he was still shouting, still blaming everyone but himself. After the hearing, I approached Isabelle. She looked tired but resolute, holding her newborn son close. I'm so sorry, Isabelle, I said, my voice thick with emotion, for everything, for not stopping it sooner. She gave me a small, sad smile. It wasn't your job to stop him, Ben. It was his job to not be that person. She told me they were moving to the Pacific Northwest, where Daniel was from. They needed a fresh start, far away from the shadow of Leo. I hope he gets the help he needs, she said. But we can't be part of that journey. We have to protect our family. I asked if I could ever see the children, get pictures. She hesitated, then shook her head. I think a clean break is best for everyone, for their safety and for my peace. Goodbye, Ben. I watched her walk away, her family whole and safe, and I felt a profound grief for the brother I had lost, not to prison, but to the toxic pride that consumed him long ago. I started therapy myself to untangle the guilt and the codependency. I learned that my love for my brother didn't have to mean saving him from himself. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their own actions. Leo will be released in a few years. I don't know what will become of him. I hope he finds a way to heal, but I know now that I cannot be his keeper. His story is a tragic lesson in how cruelty, left unchecked, doesn't just wound others. It inevitably destroys the one who wields it. Isabelle, Ava, Amelia, and their new baby brother have faded into a new life, and I truly hope they have found the happiness that was so cruelly denied to them for so long.